It's important to remember the past and all the sacrifices that have been made to keep our country safe. And so now, I will give you the details of my film. I have to read it because I know I will forget afterwards. First, I want to give you a short rundown on the history of the area at this time of year. In the late 1930s and the 1940s, world conditions were really bad. Hitler was advancing in Europe. At this time, Japan was also expanding, and they were running out of space and other natural resources, mainly oil. They had invaded China and had taken over Manchuria and several nearby islands. Hirohito was the emperor of Japan. In 1941, the commander-in-chief of Japan's naval fleet was Admiral Yamamoto. Yamamoto was the one who planned and initiated the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. Incidentally, Yamamoto had lived here and studied here in the United States at Harvard, and in the 1920s, he was a naval attaché in Washington, D.C., so he was very knowledgeable about the conditions of the United States. He also believed his people to be the chosen race. Since he realized the enormous strength and the power of the United States, he knew his best policy would be a surprise attack on our fleet that was stationed at the time in Pearl Harbor. On November 26th, they sailed with a fleet of 40 ships from northern Japan to the Hawaiian Islands and followed a route that took them far to the north so they wouldn't be discovered. On the morning of December 7th, 1941, stationed at a point 200 miles north of Oahu, the Hawaiian Islands, the Japanese had 6 aircraft carriers and 24 supporting vessels, and also a separate group of submarines. The 6 aircraft carriers launched their first fleet of 181 planes, composed of dive bombers, fighter planes, and torpedo planes. The first wave of Japanese aircraft arrived over their target areas shortly before 7:55 a.m. on December 7th, 19. Anyway, their leader sent coded messages, Tora, 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 telling the fleet that the attack had begun and that a complete surprise had been achieved. They attacked our military airfields, and at the same time, our fleet, which was anchored at Pearl Harbor. The Navy, Marine, and Army bases were all bombed and strafed at the same time. The bombs and the torpedoes were being dropped on our ships moored at Pearl Harbor. The purpose of this simultaneous attack was to destroy our American planes so that they could not rise to intercept the Japanese. They were at the air base there in Pearl Harbor. Of the more than 90 ships anchored at Pearl Harbor, the primary targets were the 8 battleships that were anchored there. Within the first few minutes of the attack, all the battleships had taken bombs or torpedo hits. The battleship West Virginia and the California sank immediately. The Oklahoma was hit by several torpedoes and rolled over. completely over, trapping over 400 inside. The Arizona was mortally wounded by an armor-piercing bomb, which ignited the ship's forward ammunition magazine. In less than 9 minutes, she sank. The resulting explosion and the fire that killed 1,177 crewmen, the greatest loss of life on any ship that day, and about half the total number of Americans killed. There was a short lull in the fury of the attack, and about 8:40, the second wave of 170 Japanese attack planes descended again on Pearl Harbor. At that time, the battleship Nevada, despite her wounds, she managed to get underway and move down the channel toward the open sea. The Japanese concentrated on their attacks on this moving battleship, hoping to sink her in the channel, and thus it would block the narrow entrance to Pearl Harbor. When the attack ended shortly before 10 a.m., less than 2 hours after it had begun, the American loss was tremendous. 21 ships of the U.S. Pacific Fleet were sunk or damaged. Aircraft losses were 188 were destroyed, 159 were damaged with the majority hit. Therefore, the planes had a chance. They attacked the planes so they could not take off and damage board fleet. The American dead numbered 2,403 people. Japanese losses were completely light. 29 planes, less than 10% of the attacking force, failed to return to their carriers. Incidentally, the night before the attack, some 10 miles outside the entrance to Pearl Harbor, 5 Japanese midget submarines, each carrying 2 crewmen and 2 torpedoes, were launched from the larger mothership. Their mission was to enter Pearl Harbor and do as much damage as possible. Before dawn on December 7th, the destroyer Ward spotted an unidentified submarine periscope near the entrance to Pearl Harbor. They attacked and sunk this sub. They are credited now with firing the very first shots of World War II. The Japanese success was overwhelming, but it was not complete. Of all the mistakes that they made on December 7, 1941, Japan's decision to head home after the 2 waves of attacks may have been their worst decision. They could have come on the West Coast and attacked us. The United States had more than its share of luck that Sunday morning. The aircraft carrier, the Lexington, the Enterprise, and the Rohnert were all out at sea. Virtually untouched was the submarine base. Also nearly untouched were the dry docks, the repair shops, and the entire fuel stock for the Pacific Fleet. The fuel tank farm, which was loaded with aviation gas and bunker fuel, did not take a single bomb or a bullet that might have set the whole harbor on fire. The fleet was in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor that morning, and not the much more deeper offshore. Had battleships like the California or West Virginia gone down there, the personal casualties would have been much heavier and salvage would have been impossible. Finally, there was a luck that Japan had no way of understanding just how Pearl Harbor would inspire everyone from President Roosevelt to the minority messmates aboard the warships to make an effort that brought out the very best that Americans could offer. Now, most important, the shock and the anger caused by the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor united our divided nation and was translated into a wholehearted commitment to victory in World War II. In 1945, President Harry Truman ordered 2 atomic bombs to be dropped on Japan. The Enola Gay, commanded by Colonel Paul Tibbets, dropped the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima on August 5th, 1945. A second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki on August 9th. On September 2nd, 1945, Japan surrendered. General Douglas MacArthur, the Supreme Commander of the Allied forces, led the surrender ceremony on the main deck of the USS Missouri, battleship Missouri, the last battleship that had been commissioned into the United States at that time. The ceremony took place in Tokyo Bay, surrounded by a vast Allied armada. Thus, the long chain of battles and events caused by the attack on Pearl Harbor nearly 4 years before was nearly over. It was finally over. Now comes my story, if you'd like to hear it. After high school, I attended Chico State College for 1 year, taking pre-nursing classes. That was mandatory then. And the following year, I entered Highland School of Nursing at the Alameda County Hospital in Oakland. I graduated from there in 1941 with my RN degree. And to this time, the different branches of the military needed nurses. And so I checked them all out. There was the Navy, the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, and of course I preferred the Navy. So I enlisted. I felt that these boys were the cutest. And while I was waiting for my Navy orders to come through, I started working on the 6th floor of the maternity ward at Peralta Hospital in Oakland. Then on December 7th, the news of the Japanese attack spread quickly to California about the bombing. It was a really scary time. While I was at work in the hospital, we had many blackouts and had plans to move all our patients to the basement, and just in case of a bomb attack. We thought for sure the Japanese were going to attack and invade California. I was working nights at the time, and when the sirens bellowed and the entire Bay Area went black, it was a scene I will never forget. All our homes had blackout curtains. One evening, another nurse and I were downtown Oakland having dinner when the sirens went off and started to blow, and the blackout occurred, leaving everyone in darkness. We left the restaurant and tried to walk to our apartments, which were quite a distance away. The streets were crowded with people, aimlessly walking in the dark. We tried to find our way home, when fortunately a police officer found us and put us safely into his patrol car, and then he took us home. It was really a scary but exciting time too, with a lot of panic. We expected the Japanese planes to fly over and bomb us at any time in it. In February 1942, my Navy commanders came through, and I was to report to the Navy Hospital at Mare Island near Vallejo. I spent days with my parents in Northern California before returning to the hospital. This beautiful naval hospital was about 30 miles north of San Francisco. And I really liked my work there. Since we were now at war, we were trained on how to evacuate the wards and what to do in case of an air raid and an attack. We were also trained to use air masks. Again, we had many blackouts and expected bombs to be dropped on us anytime. Fortunately, it never happened, but it was a very eerie feeling. We had a constant arrival of patients coming in from Pearl Harbor and from the South Pacific. Many were burned cases and amputees, plus extremely wounded from the battles and conflict. I was always amazed at how brave these patients were. I enjoyed my work, and we nurses were treated like royalties. At the time, I was rated as an ensign, and we had good living quarters and ate in the officers' mess hall. Okay, enough about this. In 1939, Dean Darrow, a boy in Wisconsin, enlisted in the Navy and was trained to be a fire patrolman, third class. His job was to line up the guns for the firing. He really liked the Navy and had planned to spend and make a career of it. On December 7th, he was aboard the battleship, the USS West Virginia, and they were moored along with all of our Navy fleet at Pearl Harbor. His ship was tied up right next to the Arizona. Dean was getting ready to go ashore in Honolulu, and more importantly, to girl watch. He was standing at his locker in his skivvies, which is Navy talk for, when he heard the planes coming over. His first thought was, oh, that was a Navy drill and it would spoil his plans to go ashore. However, when the planes came down close, he could see on the underside of their wings the large Japanese insignia, the rising sun. Also in Navy talk, it as the meatball. Then all hell broke loose. He ran for his battle station, which was aboard, and when he got there, he found all the ammunition and everything was locked up. The Japanese were dropping their torpedoes and bombing everything on the battleship, on Battleship Row. At approximately 10 a.m., Dean saw the battleship, the USS Arizona, blow up after a bomb slammed through her deck and ignited her ammunition magazine. In less than 9 minutes, she sank with nearly 1,200 boys of her crew, which was a total loss. He also saw the battleship, the USS Oklahoma, was hit by several torpedoes. It rolled over, trapping over 400 men inside. Dean's ship, the USS West Virginia, was hit 7 times with torpedoes, and Dean was blown off his ship and into the blazing waters below. The oil from the torpedoes, from the torpedo Arizona, and also the West Virginia, was leaking out into the water and it ignited. Dean, being a good swimmer, was able to get away from the fire, and he waved to a whale boat, little skiff that was rescuing the boys in the water. As he was pulling himself up into the boat, the Japanese flew over and were strafing the boys in the water. Dean was hit with a bullet and was taken unconscious into the ship and to the hospital. After several hours at the hospital, he regained consciousness. With all the confusion and so many that were severely wounded, Dean was quickly examined and then issued a set of clean clothes and sent back to duty. He was sent then to the South Pacific on the destroyer, the USS Rohnert, and later to the USS Darwin. Every time there was a German port alarm, he would run for his battle station, but he never made it. His commanding officer ignored these symptoms and just figured he had passed out because of more nerves. So one morning, 4.5 months later, Dean awoke with a terrible pain in his side. So he was transferred to the Naval Hospital ship, the Solus, the USS Solus. They immediately took out his appendix, and it was early then, while he was recovering from the surgery, that he was able to talk with the doctor to tell him how he felt, and that he was always short of breath, dizzy, and his heart was beating in a very strange way. The doctor ordered an x-ray, and afterwards, several doctors studied the results, but Dean was never told what they had found, only that he should be very quiet now and limit all his activities. When he returned to his bed, he called the corpsman and asked him, "What was wrong?" The corpsman answered, "Don't you know you have a bullet in your heart?" This was indeed quite a shock to Dean. He was then sent to the Naval Hospital at Bear Island, and this is where I met him. He was sent to my ward, and he was my patient. Dr. Holman, a cardiologist from Stanford Hospital, studied Dean's case and told him he had good news and he had bad news. The bad news was that he would not live long with that big bullet in his heart. The good news was that he thought he could surgically remove it. Now, this was back in 1942, and heart surgery was rarely done. The doctor told Dean to think it over and decide what he wanted to do. Strangely enough, when Dean was attacked when he was about 5 years old, his father tragically died of a heart attack when boxing with a friend. When Dean was about 17 years old, he was on a hunting trip with his brother. When they came to a fence, they perched the gun against it and tried to climb over the fence. The gun accidentally went off, going through the brother's heart, and he died right there. When his mother heard of this news, she had a heart attack and died. Now, Dean had to make a hard decision. I'm sure he thought he would die on the operating table. So he talked to his family, and after much consideration, he decided he might just as well go through with the surgery. If he was going to die, he would die on the operating table. He was prepared for surgery twice, and twice it was canceled. This would be hard for any patient who was scheduled for surgery. The surgery finally was on April 17, 1942. He had lived 4.5 months with his bullet in his heart. Just before going into surgery, he came to the nurse's station, and I gave him his pre-op meds. Because my maiden name was Beck, everybody called me Becky. Dean took hold of my hand and he said, "Miss Becky, if I ever come out from the surgery, will you go on liberty with me?" Of course, what else could I do? I said yes. He was in surgery for quite a few hours, and when he finally came back, I was assigned to be his special duty nurse. Now, in those days, the hospitals did not even have a recovery room, nor a special cardiac section, or any of the special equipment they have today in their hospitals. When he opened his eyes while coming out of anesthesia, he saw me, and the first thing he said was, "We're going on liberty, aren't we?" Well, he made a rapid recovery. About 6 weeks later, we did go on Liberty to San Francisco. We had a great time, and then we had several dates following this. Dean wanted me to meet his family, so we flew by United Airlines from San Francisco Airport to Los Angeles. We flew on a small prop plane holding about 8 passengers. The San Francisco airport was very small then, just one large room. Prior to our return flight, Dean's family wanted to take us up on Mount Wilson for a view of the Los Angeles area at night. While there, a blackout occurred, and all the lights went out. It was very eerie, and we were afraid we would not make our return flight back to San Francisco. And since we couldn't drive down the mountain in the dark with our lights off, the lights finally came back on in about 30 minutes. Our plane was late taking off because of the blackout. On our return flight, we had spotlights focused on our plane many times. The lights stayed on us until our plane was identified. It was pretty scary and eerie. Because of the delays, we almost didn't get back to Maryland on time, and we would have been put on AWOL. We had to take a taxi all the way from Oakland to Maryland, which must have been a bit expensive for Dean. After numerous other dates, and after getting our honorable discharges from the Navy, Dean and I were married in Reno. We spent our honeymoon at Lake Tahoe and at Yosemite. It was very difficult times during the war. Gasoline was rationed. You couldn't buy tires, but had to patch and repatch tires. We had red stamps for meat, new stamps for shoes, and household things. These stamps were issued monthly to us and by the government. If you ran out of stamps, you went without. Appliances were impossible to get, like during today's coronavirus pandemic, like that. Now, at this time, toilet paper and other paper products were hard to find and were also rationed. We lived in Los Angeles area for 5 years. Then we moved to Pleasant Hill, right here near Santa Rosa, for the next 35 years, where we raised our family and had a great life. My first child was born on December 7th, 2 years after the attack on Pearl Harbor. Dean worked for Sperry Marine Service gyroscope company, where his expertise took him worldwide, repairing compasses and steering gear on the ships. All things he learned in the Navy. Here are some of the interesting things that did happen while he was out on trial run on the submarines. One time, the hatch on the submarine had not sealed properly, and water poured in and got onto the batteries and released toxic fumes. Another time, they were submerged in the San Francisco Bay, and they came up under the bottom of another ship. Then, off the coast of California, I received a phone call telling me not to worry, they have been found. I didn't even know they had been lost. The submarine had lost its prop. And then on the positive side, I did get to go on some of Dean's final runs. Most not known to me was a Danish ship. We were treated like royalty on this ship, although we could not understand their language at all. We were far out at sea, and the only way to return to shore was by a tugboat. I had to jump down from the Danish ship about 6 feet to get onto our tugboat that was going to take us to the shore. In spite of all the mishaps, Dean loved his work. When our children were in high school, I returned to my nursing career, where I worked at numerous hospitals in the Bay Area. We retired to Clear Lake in 1977. Sadly, in December of 1991, Dean had a massive heart attack and he passed away. It was exactly 50 years after he was shot at Pearl Harbor, and he was almost 75 years old. Dean said the best thing he got out of the Navy was his nurse. When the bullet was removed from his heart, it left a cavity, which I was able to feel was mine. And now I have something here I wanted to show you. This is the bullet. Some of the silvery gray paint where they always paint our futures. So apparently it had hit another ship and had ricocheted off and hit Dean in the back. Had it not ricocheted off something, it would have gone right through him. But as it was, he had that bullet in his heart. Here is a picture of him right after he got married. And this is another picture. This was his garrison hat. We both worked. Anyway, as time goes on, they all have passed away. And I am the only one that I know of that is left in both Lake County and here in Santa Rosa of any Pearl Harbor survivors. So that's it. This is called a garrison hat that they Pearl Harbor survivors wore. I think that's it.
Who are you, buddy? My arms are dead.
Thank you so much.